ever been in a long-distance relationship? Okay. Keep your hand raised if you're still in that relationship. One for one. Okay. And raise your hand if you were in the relationship, it just didn't go quite as you had planned. Yeah? Anyone? Everyone else? Okay, yeah. Well, I have been in a long-distance relationship, and it lasted a whole 10 days. I'm going to tell you about that. We're going to call this boy Johnny, since this is going to be on the internet. We're going to protect his identity, I guess. He was my first real boyfriend, and we would spend meaningful moments cuddling under his Ninja Turtle blanket and watching Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton. It was the classic example of young puppy love. Unfortunately, all good things must come to a close, which is what happened when I went on a church mission trip for a week and a half. I came back from my trip only to realize Johnny and I were no longer together. It was a rough breakup, you could say. I no longer needed my mom to drop me off at the movie theater or at the mall in her minivan so that I could maybe, just maybe, hold Johnny's hand for 2.5 minutes before we got embarrassed. I now spent my nights at home where I would wait for our dial-up internet to load so I could sit for hours on AOL Instant Messenger, ranting about how boys were stupid and making up new forms of emoticons. All this goes to say I'm personally not a huge advocate for long-distance relationships. And I will use these next few minutes to explain to you about why you should not try and carry out a long-distance relationship. Don't get me wrong, I know plenty of long-distance relationships that have gotten lucky enough to succeed. Props to you. However, I believe that it is healthier to not be in a long-distance relationship because of the communication barrier, the distance that makes you grow apart, and, of course, the jealousy factor. Communication is a key part in any relationship, especially a dating relationship. Without communication, couples are likely to make false assumptions about their partner, creating unnecessary tension and unresolved issues that will most likely cause a catastrophic breakup in the future. Between 25 to 40% of all romantic relationships in college are long distance. You would think that, due to the rise in technological advances nowadays, that maintaining adequate communication in long distance relationships would be insanely easy and not an issue at all. But I have personally interviewed many couples that have been or are currently in long distance relationships, and they argue that different forms of communication only make things more complicated. For instance, one big downfall to long-distance relationships is that you cannot see the person's face. So, of course, they invented Skype, video chatting, problem solved. However, the people that I interviewed who had been in failed long-distance relationships said that it was harder to try and schedule a common time to video chat or even talk on the phone without other distractions. These time conflicts were not only based on schedule differences, but they were also on things such as internet connection or cell phone service. Many of my interviewees expressed how it's hard to schedule out an hour or so each day to have direct, uninterrupted phone conversation with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And even if you can succeed at adequate communication, you are still missing physical closeness, which creates yet another barrier between you and your significant other. This brings me to my second point. The lack of physical closeness undoubtedly leads each person leading their own separate lives. And this can affect the relationship because as the time goes on, it gets harder and harder to connect with who you're dating when you're both partaking in completely separate schedules and surrounded by completely different friends in completely different places. It just gets way too confusing and too complicated to try to catch someone up constantly on your daily activities. Because of all these factors, it would only make sense that the couple would grow apart from each other, at least a little bit. And I'm going to go against the cliche that distance makes the heart grow fonder, because sometimes distance can just complicate things and kind of just put a strain on the relationship. Like I said, it's exhausting to try to catch someone else up on the activities of your day, not to mention trying to feel special on your birthday or trying to feel comforted during a funeral or during hard times without them right there by your side. Being in a relationship is all about experiencing life with that person, and therefore is much more easily done when you're in close proximity to them. My last point isn't one that always occurs, but I think it happens more subconsciously than we think, and that's the jealousy factor. Because your loved one isn't in a place where you can keep an eye on them, it is easy to make assumptions about their actions and their whereabouts. It does not take much to become suspicious, and once you are, You can let your imagination wander, creating make-up situations about their unfaithfulness to you, which also leads to the topic of cheating. Due to jealousy and other circumstances I have previously mentioned, like the lack of physical closeness, cheating is proven to be more common in long-distance relationships. One site that I researched stated that couples often need daily physical interaction with one another in order to keep their relationship healthy. As another disclaimer, I know that this is not true for all couples, and I know that many independent people who are in long-distance relationships are thriving. And I know it is not something that is impossible to do, and I know it's not always destined for failure. But I've spent the last few minutes explaining to you why I think it is healthier not to be in a long-distance relationship. The communication barrier, the distance that makes you grow apart, and the jealousy factor all play major roles in the long-distance relationships in my life that I have seen fizzle out. Now that you are all aware of these common trends, I hope I have encouraged you to take action and get close to your loved one, or else find a way to make your long-distance